Hakeem to say, right?
Exactly. One of the greats of all time. Step back three right here. Boone!
That's the third three Boone has made today. They have been big shots.
Oh, they steal it with Cunningham. Anderson, Cunningham, three. Wow! Thompson wheeling, steering, swerving, spinning, firing. Good!
What a shot
With
that
six
was.
to fire. This will make headlines. Oregon State is going to the Sweet 16.
So Sunday night, the Oklahoma State basketball season came to an end with an 80-70 loss to the Oregon State Beavers in the round of 32. And while the run came to an end in only the second round of the NCAA tournament, after entering as the 4th seed in the Midwest region, there's quite a season to look back on. And the season, it started before November and before October. It actually started back in July when the NCAA handed the program a 1-year postseason ban following an investigation into recruiting violations by former assistant coach Lamont Evans. The school would file appeal immediately, and the suspension even confused coach Mike Boynton and then athletic director Mike Holden. The season, which would have so many questions, mostly related to COVID-19, as the Cowboys weren't immune from the disease, would begin without the school receiving an answer on the appeal. However, the cloud hanging over the team, the Cowboys would begin the season 6-0, leading into conference play, before losing 3 of their first 4 Big 12 games, including blowing a 19-point lead to West Virginia. The Cowboys would quickly right the ship, winning 8 of the next 10 contests, including a bonus time wins over both Texas and Texas Tech, both of which both Landon and I had the privilege of seeing in person. Afterwards, the team would go on to defeat Oklahoma, not once but twice in a 48-hour period, earning the Bedlam sweep, before entering the Big 12 championship tournament as the 5 seed before finishing second, particularly after a semifinal win against Baylor before falling to Texas again. And then came the NCAA tournament where, well, disappointment as the season came to an end with that loss to Oregon State after being a 4 seed and becoming one of the many teams to be upset in this tournament, in this unpredictable tournament that concludes a rather unpredictable season. But even though it was disappointing how the season ended, it was an interesting one to say the least.
For sure.
It brought an end to an exciting, exhilarating, and a once-in-a-lifetime season in which we witnessed a generational talent, Cade Cunningham, the rise of what I believe is the next great coach in college basketball, and the growth of one of the country's youngest teams. So, Landon, as we look back on this season, what do you take away?
Well, I agree with the statement about Mike Boynton. We are witnessing a coach right now who is growing. Not only is he a coach that is able to get the support of the program behind him, but the fans are just, I personally love Mike Boynton. Every game he goes over there and he gives us a clap. He's like, you guys are important too. Especially after that Tech game, he came over there and he was just pumped up, and it got me fired up. And that's what you want out of your coach. You want your coach to unite not only the fan base, but also the program. And it seems like that's exactly what he's doing. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. And I think also Cade Cunningham has a bright future ahead of him. Now, I will say this. When you talk about like your generational talents, think about just the prospects coming out of college. Zion Williamson was huge. Now, where do we rate Cunningham amongst? And obviously, I don't think he's on Williamson's level, but I will say he's probably a step down. But I will say he's one of the better prospects we've seen coming out of college, I think, since I would compare him to similar. I would put him close to. It's hard to compare because there's just the players are different, but the attention around him and the sort of energy around him, I would put him somewhat near, and it's hard, but I would say a Julius Randle-esque player. Now, you can argue it's just like the Kentucky players, you got your Duke players that come out. Now I hope Cunningham just goes in the NBA and it's rookie of the year, just comes in there and tears it up. We'll see, because his game is the skill set he has is very It's very NBA, like it's a very NBA type skill set. However, there are cases where you'll watch him and the effort is not there all the time. And that's my critique on his game is the effort. I'll throw that to you.
So when we talk about Cade Cunningham being generational, I think there is one particular part of his game that you don't see very often, and he has generational understanding of the game of basketball.
Yes.
His basketball IQ, and this is what we said a lot about Luka Doncic when he was coming over from Slovenia or from Spain where he was playing professional basketball, is that his IQ is far ahead of everybody right now. And you see it with Luka's translation to the NBA, and so almost the same with LaMelo Ball as well in his rookie season. And you don't see this very often. Like before Luka Doncic and LaMelo Ball, the last person we really could say that about was LeBron James when he came into the NBA, and that was back in 2003. So it's been a long time since we've seen a guy just come into the NBA with this absurd amount of intelligence in terms of how to play the game of basketball. And that's what Cade Cunningham brings to me. And with all of that, then you combine the passing ability, the ability to shoot off the dribble, to shoot step-in jump shots. I think, no, he doesn't have he's not the most physically superior like Zion Williamson, which I think that's what you were getting at in terms of like his physique.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, he's not the fastest person. We know this. He's not the most athletic. But if you have basketball IQ, you can make it work.
For a lot,
you can make it work with what you can do, and that's what was very impressive to watch about Cade Cunningham.
Well, I will say the best thing that Cade Cunningham does, in my opinion, in obviously comparing him to NBA players is tough. And as far as a skill set, I wouldn't say a skill set matches up with this individual, but in crunch time, Dame time,
he's very
Cade Cunningham.
Yes.
When that clock hits 4 minutes, inside those 4 minutes, it just doesn't seem like he misses a shot. And that's from an OSU fan standpoint, so there is a bias there.
Well, we've seen it.
But every game, it's like, okay, maybe he won't deliver in the clutch this time. And yes, against Oregon State, he didn't have the best game, but there were a lot of other factors. It was not.
Like there was something off about the Oregon State game.
We were down the whole game, and we would get close. We would make a run. Because college basketball is a game of runs. I've been saying that. I mean, it's obvious, too. You look at the bottom right, and it seems like every 5 minutes it's 8-0 run, 10-0 run, you know? And so we would make runs, we'd get back in there, and then all of a sudden they'd make a run. And it's just like we couldn't catch up to them. And then in the final couple minutes, we were there, we were close, but then the game got away from us. And I won't go in too deep into that game because then I'll get a little fired up and I'll be a little upset. But as far as Cade Cunningham, the ability to deliver when the game is on the line, night in and night out, he's going to have success at some level in the NBA. Now, whether it's he becomes a role player who is able to hit that shot in the important situation when his team needs it, or if he is that superstar that's able to hit that shot or be clutch or go get those buckets he's going to be successful. If you deliver when the game is on the line, you have a spot in the NBA.
Yeah. One of the more fascinating pieces of this season, in your opinion, was what?
You know, the most fascinating thing to me was the fact that we watched the OSU basketball team grow up during a short, it seemed like a short season. And it was quick. Obviously, you have to grow up and you have to mature over a span of a season. But we watched like you said, arguably one of the youngest teams in the country. We watched them start out, decent. They started out hot, and then they cooled down. But then you watch them go on this run, and especially that Baylor game in the semifinal for the Big 12 tournament, that was the defining game. That showed me that, we lost them twice, but we were never. In both of those losses, we were never out. We were close. In one of those games, we didn't have Cade, and we got dominated for a brief span at the end. But we were never out of either of those losses. And then you come into that Baylor game in the semifinal, and that OSU team came out swinging. I mean, they were running the court.
Yeah.
They looked great. And you just watch a team with a coach and young players grow. It only brings optimism for the future, but also it's just interesting how how a team can come together, and watching a freshman star who likely wasn't even going to get I shouldn't say likely because the confusion of ice likely, but most likely Cade Cunningham is going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. But he still cared so much about this OSU basketball team.
Yeah.
It was great to watch a team come together like that. To me, it was fascinating to see players like Avery Anderson step up and him grow over the season.
And that's where I was going with that. So the most fascinating piece to me was Avery Anderson.
Exactly.
And there's a direct correlation between Avery Anderson's growth and the progression of this team. And when we first got back to campus, I believe in mid to late January, when we first saw Avery Anderson, he was nothing more than a slasher who was very good on the defensive side, didn't really shoot the ball very much. But as the season progressed, and then you saw him against West Virginia, I believe it was, when he dropped 31.
Oh, yeah.
In Cade's absence, he went from a guy who is a role player, a secondary guy, maybe a great guy off the bench. He's for sure a great sixth man. Mm-hmm. But then you saw him when Cade was out with that ankle sprain in the second time we played West Virginia, I believe it was. And he said, I've progressed enough to where you can give me the ball. Mm-hmm. And he led that team to a victory, again, over a quality opponent.
Oh, yeah.
And he was going toe-to-toe with Deuce McBride, who's a very tenacious defender. So the progression of Avery Anderson, to me, was the most fascinating thing. And when he progressed, the team reached an apex in production and performance that was probably the best in college basketball.
Yeah.
In terms of this is what the best we can look like. And maybe that was hit in the first Oklahoma game. Maybe it was hit when we defeated Baylor. But around that time, from the overtime win against Texas all the way to, I believe, the end of the Big 12 tournament, because in the 2 games in the NCAA tournament, they did not look good at all.
No, not at all.
But that apex before they kind of went on like a little downslope, which led to the end of the season, I believe that was one of the more fun apexes in the country.
For sure. And to me, it looked like, before the tournament started, wow, this OSU team's peaking at the right time. Like,
yes,
this is going to be interesting. And then against Liberty, it's like, okay, it's an off game. And then Oregon State just came out there, and we looked shell-shocked. And it was like, okay, well, that sucks. Because it is. Right. That's all you can say when you get upset like that.
Agreed.
That sucks.
And we were talking a lot about this past weekend as we watched teams like North Texas, teams like Loyola, Syracuse is still in the tournament, and Oral Roberts, for crying out loud, a 15 seed that's now in the Sweet 16. They're the first team to go there since Florida Gulf Coast in 2013. But we were watching all these upsets, and we're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And then it happens to you, and you're like, well, crap.
Yeah. You always cheer for the upset until you're the team that gets upset.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it sucks.
By double digits. So before we get into the Sweet 16 and previewing that, because there's a lot of good stuff going on this weekend, what's your biggest takeaway from the tournament so far?
Well, it's March Madness. That's my takeaways. Expect the unexpected. You got UNT winning their first game in program history. Mm-hmm. You got Abilene Christian winning their first game in program history.
Here, let me jump in here real fast because I just picked up my phone and then I see this. Houston is trading Victor Oladipo to Miami.
This just happened?
This just happened 2 minutes ago.
Good for Oladipo, first off. Second off, that's actually awesome. That's the first time we've had an update on the show, just a live. That's awesome.
I love that.
I like that, actually. For Miami, especially for a team that has got the skill, they might need. I like Oladipo. I've always been a big Oladipo fan. Mm-hmm. I just feel he had a really solid season in Indiana, and then he got hurt, and he hasn't been able to regain that status. I mean, he looked like he was going to be on the rise to a superstar at one point.
Yes,
and he just never got there. I hope Miami is a good spot for him to revive his career, maybe. I wouldn't say revive his career because he's still a very solid player in the NBA, but maybe somewhere where he can gain that status of a superstar or help lead a team to a title. And maybe it's not this year, but next year, a couple years. I mean, what did it say is
we don't know just yet.
Okay, so it's just
that's
interesting.
This just happened. Also of note, the Hawks are trading Rajon Rondo to the Clippers. The Clippers are giving up Lou Williams in this trade.
Really?
That's,
Are you serious?
That's interesting to me. Now I know the Clippers were in dire need of a point guard because Reggie Jackson has underperformed, but you would have thought they would have tried to hold on to Lou Williams, who might be the NBA's best sixth man.
That's interesting.
And also of note, Kyle Lowry was not moved. Kyle Lowry will stay with Toronto, and Lonzo Ball is staying put in New Orleans. So we had heard a lot of chatter around Lonzo Ball possibly being on the move.
Yeah.
He is going to stay in the Big Easy for at least the rest of this season.
Okay.
Now,
and Lowry is there too.
And Lowry will stay put
I was
in
interested
Toronto.
about that one.
Yes. Back to the tournament.
Well, that was interesting. That was I'm actually going to be excited to see Oladipo in a Heat uniform, I will say. But yes, back to the tournament. Let's see. So I took away that it is March Madness, and you don't know what's going to happen, especially in a year with COVID. It seems like everything's just been so unpredictable. And sports are always unpredictable. The upsets happen. There's your Cinderella stories. But I will say this. Gonzaga and Baylor, who came into the tournament, I would say they were the two favorites from the start of the tournament. And Michigan could have been, but they lost
Isaiah Livers.
Exactly. So I think Baylor and Gonzaga proved that they were the best two teams in the country all along. They proved it, and they're taking care of their business. The other thing I take away is that when you come into a tournament hot, typically that means you're going to be able to ride that momentum all the way. Illinois, Bama's still in. They came in hot. I'm high on Bama. I know you like Bama too.
I have Bama in one of my brackets.
But I do as well. Illinois and OSU came into this tournament looking like they were on fire.
And both just hit a brick wall.
Both are gone. So it's March Madness is a time where momentum can mean a lot, but it doesn't mean as much. Like as far as NBA playoffs, the team that gets hot is a team that you'll probably see in the finals. It's about who gets hot at the right time. You cannot say the same for March Madness.
I agree. So in terms of coming into March Madness hot, and I'll get to my main takeaway in a minute, but since you mentioned that, I love that segue. Syracuse. So Syracuse, the 11th seed, I believe, in the Midwest region. Am I correct there?
Let me double.
Yes, it is in the Midwest region.
Yeah,
I see it in West Virginia with them. Syracuse came in incredibly hot out of that ACC tournament, and they have just been steadily improving throughout the season because at the beginning of the season, they looked dead in the water. It looked like we weren't going to be seeing them this far. And the ascension of Buddy Boeheim has been phenomenal to watch over the past couple weeks. Right now in the tournament, he's averaging 27.5. He's shooting 56.5% from three in the tournament, and this team just plays hard.
Right.
And they're winning games. That zone is still as impenetrable as ever. This is the best that zone has looked in a long time. And I'm very high on Syracuse. I think they can continue to bust more brackets. They didn't bust mine because I did predict them to get this far.
Yeah.
But they're going to make some noise, and they can cause a lot of chaos as we get closer and closer to the Final Four. My main takeaway is Baylor.
Really?
And there's something about this team. Number one, I think they're going to win the national championship. In all of my main brackets I had Baylor winning the national championship. I think they will win it.
Okay.
They have 3 NBA-style guards.
Yeah.
NBA-capable guards.
Right.
You have Jared Butler, who I believe is the general, who can also shoot the ball in the mid-range. He can score from wherever. Mitchell. His first name slipped me right now.
I would if it was on spot, I would accidentally call him Donovan Mitchell.
I almost did that as well.
It's just the way he looks. And
he looks exactly like him. Not to mention he wears the same
number. Yeah.
But Mitchell, he's incredible. He's an electric defender. He's a very good defender.
Oh yeah.
And then you have Teague, Matteo Teague, who might be the best 3-and-D player in the country right now. I compare him to Klay Thompson.
I like that
He
one.
looks like Klay Thompson, except with the ability to create his own shot as well.
Right.
And I think he's going to be a great spot-up shooter and defender in the NBA, somewhere similar to what we see with Gary Trent Jr. right now, who, by the way, was also traded away from Portland as well. He's
going on.
He's going to Toronto. He and Roddy Hood are going to Toronto for Norman Powell.
Okay.
But just a little side note there. But I love Baylor. Their bigs are phenomenal. Matthew Mayer coming off the bench is one of the just funny and more awkward players to watch because he's a basketball player with a mullet.
Yeah.
But this Baylor team is fun. They're physical. They can get at you. They make shots like no team in the country.
They do.
I think the only team that makes shots even similar to them is Gonzaga and Alabama. And Alabama just makes shots similar to them because they put up so many. But I believe right now, my stock on Gonzaga has gone up high after watching them in these first couple games, that I believe Baylor and Gonzaga, from the start of the season, a lot of us have been seeing this, but even now it's even more evident that Baylor and Gonzaga are on a collision course for the NCAA tournament championship.
It's going to be, and that would be a slugfest in that final. I think that would be a great game to watch just because those two teams are – I do agree. Baylor looks like one of, if not the best team in the country right now. I would actually say Baylor would have the edge over Gonzaga.
Okay, I'm right there too.
Because if you think too much about your bracket, the worst bracket I had is the one I tried to
thought the most
because it doesn't matter.
Right. More trade deadline news.
Really? Let's get to that.
The Mavericks are acquiring J.J. Redick from the Pelicans.
That is huge.
Landon loved that.
That's huge. No, that's awesome. That is awesome because pairing a person like Luka, I did just lose it. I almost just about lost it right here.
You almost fell out of your chair.
No, I've been wanting a pure shooter in Dallas for a long time.
Yes.
And pairing him with Luka is going to be huge. So Luka's got the drive and kick capability, and it's going to open up space. So I'm so excited. I'm going to have to take a moment. I'll let you talk about it. I'm so excited.
So it was first reported by The Athletic. The Mavericks are acquiring J.J. Redick and Nico Melli in a trade from the Pelicans. Dallas is going to send over James Johnson and Wes Nwundu and a second-round pick to New Orleans. So
I like James Johnson, but
I did like James Johnson. I met him a few years ago when he was a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, and yeah, that's a.
You know what? Let's do a little. Let's do a improvised pivot here. It was a great talking about March Madness, but
let's go ahead and talk about the trade deadline. So other deals worth noting as I scroll through Twitter right now, since we absolutely did not plan to do this. Philadelphia acquired George Hill. They saw that. They sent Tony Bradley and Terrence Ferguson. It's a 3-team deal as well. So what do you think about that? While you give me more time to go scroll through more Twitter.
I don't know. I really don't think that's. I'm not gonna lie. I don't see a huge impact there. Out of all those, did you say anything about any draft picks or anything? I mean,
in this particular trade, 2 future second-round picks.
Okay, those might amount to something. But as far as I feel like that was just kind of a. I don't really see the impact of that trade, to be honest with you. Now, I will say Philadelphia is definitely going to be the team to watch for.
This just gives Philadelphia more depth. Also, Austin Rivers will be headed to Oklahoma City. It's a 3-team deal. It's a 3-team deal that also involved the Knicks as well.
If you're a Thunder fan, you don't want to fall in love with any of those Thunder players.
No, not
They'll
really.
be gone like that.
I mentioned this earlier. Toronto traded Norman Powell to Portland for Gary Trent and Roddy Hood. Your thoughts on that one?
He's a solid shooter. You know what? Where'd you say Toronto's getting Trent Williams? Trent Williams. Trent Williams is a different sport. He plays. Sorry, we've been talking football. Trent Williams is
Gary Trent and Rodney Hood. Gary Trent and Rodney Hood are going to Toronto.
Gary Trent is going to Toronto. Gary Trent's he was a solid shooter for Portland. He actually has hurt my feelings a lot when he plays the Mavs. He hits some big 3-pointers. I think that's good for Toronto. Toronto's just got one of those teams. They don't have a superstar, but they've got a lot of solid players that you don't want to play them.
No, you don't.
They're they play basketball. They're great team-style basketball. It's an interesting trade. There's a lot of trades going on. This is interesting because
the deadline is today. The deadline,
and the
deadline is in 30 minutes after we get off.
It's like the grade deadline when teachers are sitting at the desks. Everything starts coming in. Yeah, no, this is interesting.
Here's a good one for you, and see if Denver gives up too much for this. So Orlando sent Aaron Gordon to the Denver
saw that
Nuggets
one
for
this
Gary Harris, R.J. Hampton, and a first-round pick.
Jeez, a first-round pick
and a first-round pick, yes,
for Aaron Gordon.
Yes,
I
feel like Aaron Gordon's overrated.
I don't think he's. Well, I've never heard that much high praise about Aaron Gordon. I don't think he's overrated. I just don't think he's
a dunker.
Yeah, I think he had 2 phenomenal dunk contests, which he got snubbed in both of them. We won't go into it, but he had 2 phenomenal dunk contests. Besides that, I mean, is he really worth a first-round pick? And Gary Harris, and who else was that?
R.J. Hampton.
R.J. Hampton. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a young. Although maybe we'll give him a chance to go
Right.
and prove himself.
And Orlando is going into complete
Complete rebuild
mode
because they got rid of
Vucevic is also,
Vucevic,
and that was
'cause
the next one I was going to read to you. So the Bulls have traded
yes.
for Nikola Vucevic and Al-Farouq Aminu, another former Maverick.
Yes.
And the Bulls are sending over Otto Porter, who I forgot was still in the league, Wendell Carter Jr., and 2 first-round picks. And the Bulls also were trying to get Lonzo Ball, who I mentioned is going to stay in New Orleans. So the Bulls are going forward, and Orlando is just unloading. They also sent Evan Fournier to Boston.
I saw that one too. Yeah, that's interesting that the Magic are. I mean, I don't
Obviously,
blame them.
they're like a year removed from. Did they miss the playoffs last season? Or did they?
No,
make
I
it?
think they made. Were they the?
Yes, they made. They
were
made the playoffs.
8th seed.
Yes, they made
They've
the playoffs.
made it the past 2
the
years.
last 2 seasons, exactly.
But they're not. I mean, they made it. What? I don't know. Their record was. The record was under 500
It was sub
for
500
sure.
both years.
And they're not going to win. They're not going to win anything. So might as well embrace the rebuild instead of being decent.
They're going to try to build around Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac,
which
over there.
is not a terrible. I respect the idea of embracing that rebuild. It's tough when you have to do it because you know you're going to have to plug into the process.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as Aaron Gordon, I'm not a fan of that one. As far if you're Orlando, getting rid of him probably for a first-round pick is
the fact that you brought back a first-round pick and Gary Harris.
I think
quite impressive.
Yes, I think that's very impressive. Then Vucevic being gone. How old is Vucevic? He's what, 30?
I think he's 28.
28.
I don't think he's 30.
So he's not
yet.
even 30 yet.
Mm-mm.
Interesting. But so what did they get? What did they get for Vucevic?
They got Otto Porter and Wendell Carter Jr. And he is 30, by the way.
He is 30. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
The trade that I was questioning as we wrap up here, as we're approaching the hour mark, is I think Portland gave up too much for Norman Powell. And I like Norman Powell. He's a good player. But Gary Trent Jr. fit in so perfectly
I
with
agree.
that team.
Gary Trent, I don't think there's that much there between Norman Powell and Gary Trent. I would
take Gary Trent
for that Portland team. I think Gary Trent was better than Norman Powell will be
because he's a sharpshooter. He's just another shooter to space the floor for Lillard and McCollum. Not to mention, you also gave up Rodney Hood as well. And Hood, he's also a decent outside shooter, but a very long defender as well. So I'm not quite sure what Portland was doing here in terms of unloading both Trent and Hood, 2 very good perimeter players, for Norman Powell. Maybe they're higher on Norman Powell than we are, but I don't know. I don't think this helps them in their push for the postseason. Right now, they're I think 4th in the Western Conference right now. Excuse me. Right as it stands right now, but that's the one I was looking at and scratching my head and wasn't the biggest fan of.
Well, looking at it now, Norman Powell is averaging 19.6 a game, so just about 20 points per game. He's shooting basically 44% from 3.
Okay.
So he's definitely a sharp shooter, and when watching him, he's a great shooter. I just didn't think that I just didn't know Gary. I'm confused because I'm kind of like you. I don't really see the Gary Trent shooting 53% from. Or I'm sorry, I read that wrong. He's shooting 40% from.
I was about to say you're going to tell me he's shooting 53%.
I read the wrong number. That's when I read that. I was like, yeah, you don't need to get rid of anyone shooting that high.
Right.
But no, he's shooting 40%. So he's shooting about 4% lower. But still, I thought he was perfect for that system. Now, Norman Powell might be better. Only time will tell. Norman Powell has been playing great in Toronto. So is he going to be able to have that same success in Portland? We will see. I do think because C.J. McCollum, when is he?
Oh, he's
back.
He's been back.
How's he been doing?
He's been back and he's been pretty solid.
He's been solid.
Yeah.
So maybe they want Norman Powell to give him that solid because Melo's been
very interesting this season.
Yeah, he's been he's had his games where you see vintage Melo, but then also he's old and so
old Melo.
Yeah, so you see he doesn't provide all night. So maybe they're trying to get that consistent third option as a scorer. And where Gary Trent really isn't a scorer, he's just a shooter.
Right.
So I'm seeing now, by looking at it now, it makes more sense to me having that third option, because in the West, in the stacked conference, you have to worry about they're typically right as of right now. You have teams with 2 superstars, maybe 3, because you have the Lakers now. Right now, they're both gone, but you have LeBron, AD. Then you have in Dallas, you have Luka and KP, and now JJ Redick, which is not a superstar, but I'm still happy about that. I just wanted to throw that in there.
I am too.
That makes me really happy. But you have the Clippers, you have Kawhi and Paul George.
Mm-hmm.
You just have 2 superstars, the Nuggets, Jokic, Murray. I could keep going.
Right.
They're trying to get that third option now. It makes more sense to me now after looking at the 2's numbers and kind of comparing. Yes, he's shooting 44% from 3, so that is very impressive. I get it. I don't know if I would give it up so much for it.
Right.
Now, but seeing as they're going to want that third option, I actually like it now. The more and more I look at the trade and I dive into the numbers, I like the trade. However, Gary Trent was still a great piece to that system. So you're losing your sharpshooter, but you're also gaining a shooter that could probably take you over the hump come playoff time.
Cool.
So it's interesting. I'm glad it's an interesting way to conduct the show with live updates.
Yeah.
I like it.
Thought I'd play a little bit of play reporter here.
I like it.
Cool. All right. Well, it's good to be back. We haven't done this in a hot minute. So for Landon Bethea, I'm Grayson Singleton. We'll see you guys next week. Deuces.